Hello, this is Jeff, the retired farm boy, coming to you today on a Tuesday afternoon in Middle Tennessee. It's been raining most of the day. It's going to rain for the next several days. So I'm sitting around thinking about, retirement projects coming up and things that, to consider going forward. And one of those is considering the reluctance that I have, but I'm sure many people have, in starting to spend the money that you've accumulated in your lifetime for retirement. As we all know, the number one fear that anybody going into retirement will have or preparing for retirement is, do we have enough money to last until our end of life? And in some cases, that's not only do we have enough money, we may want to leave some money for our heirs. So there's that's always the fear that everybody has. But number one is making sure you have enough to get through your lifetime. And I know that is on everybody's mind when they're preparing for retirement. Mine was no different. That's something that even since I've retired, I still question, sometimes, do we have enough money? If I'd have worked another 5 years, how much of a difference would that have made in my wife and I's retirement? So my situation, if for any that haven't watched my earlier videos, while my wife is still working, and so I'm not old enough to get on Medicare. I'm able to not jump into Social Security. I'm old enough for early Social Security, but not reached my full retirement age yet. And we haven't had to dip into our retirement savings yet with my wife still working. So my wife is planning on working a couple more years, so we know that time is coming up. So we're thinking about that kind of thing. And so it gives me time to think about, how to go about that and getting myself ready for it, quite honestly, as we'll talk about going forward. For me, as you work, you're squirreling away money during your work career. For me, I got quite serious about retirement probably 15 years or so before I retired. I'd been saving into 401s and things like most people do in your 20s and 30s, but I wasn't great at it. I was, barely meeting usually enough to hit the company match is basically what I always tried to strive for. I even have taken out loans against my 401k, which is, financial people will tell you that's a terrible thing to do, but you do what you got to do sometimes, and you're dumb. When you're young, you're dumb. So you do things that you realize you probably would have been better off not doing as you get older. But the last 15 years, I really got serious about it. I was pretty much maxing out the 401k limits. When I turned 50, I started even adding that extra $5,000 that you can into your 401s after you get age 50. So, I got very diligent about it, and like everybody, started squirreling away. So once you get serious about it, you really get addicted or hooked into watching that number grow through the years. For me, I was monitoring it on a monthly basis in a spreadsheet that I put together and do all kinds of projections and everything else. I'm somewhat of a geek. So, but that was something that I enjoyed. And, you do that as you get ready for retirement. You try to put away as much money as you can. So one of the things you've also heard me say, if you watch some of my videos, is like most people will say that's retired, I sure wish I'd have done it sooner. So I started thinking about, why are some of the reasons that I didn't? Well, I've already talked about one. I didn't ever think I had enough money to do that. Another one was, I felt I needed to work to at least retirement age 62. I felt like, I was probably going to have to start Social Security when I retired. And so 62 is the earliest you could draw it. So I just had that in my mind psychologically a little bit. And I'll talk a little bit more about the psychology of this a little later in the video, so please stay tuned. You know, I felt like I just needed to work to a certain age to felt like I somewhat deserved, I guess, to retire, done my part, so to speak. I know that's crazy to think of it that way. You know, another thing was I was always worried about, we all have these titles in our jobs, and I was no different. You know, I was running departments, directing departments, IT departments. And so, you know, you have a certain status, you have a certain title, and it's like, what am I going to do when I don't have that title? And what am I going to do with all that time? You know, instead of working 50-hour average a week, you know, what am I going to do? You know, crazy thoughts. But those are kind of another reason I think I use. But one that was closer to home for me, that sort of was always in the back of my mind a little bit about when to retire, was my dad's example. My dad was a very hard worker. He never had a really good job, always worked, you know, manual labor kind of type work. Never a blue collar, always a blue collar, not a white collar worker at all. And he worked until he was 62, and he retired. And just a few years after that, I mean, you know, his health started deteriorating rapidly, and you know, 6 years into retirement, he unfortunately passed away. So that's always been something for me. Like, my dad was such a big worker his whole life. If he would have kept working, I honestly believe he would have lived longer, if that made any sense. And that's probably not true, but it's one of those things that sticks with you when it's something that touches you that close. So those are the reasons I think that, for me, you know, it's like, why didn't I retire sooner? Talk about the psychological aspect of it from my perspective. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we're lifetime savers. So to be able to retire, you need to save. And so to save, you get into the habit of saving money and growing things. And the psychological aspect of, like, when you retire and you start pulling from that money that you've saved, which is what you want to do, and you're almost afraid to start pulling money from your accounts. So it definitely is a psychological aspect to going from a saver to a spender. And I've been retired for a year and a half now, and like I said, we haven't had to take out of our retirement, but it's coming soon. And you know, I still sometimes wonder how that's going to affect me when it starts happening. I think that I've gotten a better understanding of it since I've retired, to understand, okay, Jeff, this is why you saved, is so you can do this in retirement. So there is a psychological aspect to it that I think everybody probably needs to take into account a little bit more. That was the main focus of my thinking for this video. A good example for me on, you know, me still not being fully beyond that is my wife is good enough to give me a $500 allowance a month for me to spend ever how I want to. So it's sort of like my allowance that she's given me. We sort of laugh about that, but she does give me $500 each month, and I have the hardest time spending that $500. Now, but I have spent it, don't get me wrong, and sometimes I overspend. For an example, I was always a hacker golfer, but I haven't played in probably 6 or 7 years. So I wanted to go and get me a new set of golf clubs and take the game back up. That's my plan anyway. I've played once since I've done all this, but so I went and bought online a new set of clubs. It was $800 something. Well, my allowance is only $500, and I had about $100 carry over from the previous month, something like that. So I spent, you know, I overspent my allowance. So just like that was a loan to me when the end of the month came and I got my next $500, I immediately put that back into our savings, the amount that I had not paid, feeling like that I needed to do that because that would even out the account balance. So, you know, there is something to this. a good thing to consider as you get into retirement is these kind of aspects that are more mental than anything. And I think for me, I'm not going to say that retirement is not great, because it is definitely great. And but I just want to make sure that people understand that there is some things about retirement that totally go against what you've done your whole working career. And one of those is saving. So becoming a spender instead of a saver. So, like my thumbnail said up front, spend baby spend. That's a little harder than you might think it would be. If you like this video, please comment. I'd love to get some comments on my videos. I know I'm not that great at it yet, but I'm going to get better, and I would love to get some comments on my topic, and also maybe in some comments about topics I could do in the future that might be helpful for you. So again, this is Jeff, the Retired Farm Boy, signing off.